I want to give some clarity around what I mean when I say claiming our inner narcissist. I work with people who have experienced toxic shame to a degree that is, we understand, because even if we've been physically abused or sexually abused or there's been any kind of abuse, that shame is it's just the gasoline, right, on the fire. And it's something that sticks to us forever. So we, as a being, our kind of people, have had to do the diligent work of unraveling ourselves from that gasoline that was poured on us. So at the end of the day, we could diagnostically call people who would do such a thing narcissistic personality disorder. But in my experience, if you can find, wherever you can find a narcissist, you can find a codependent, and that is simultaneously in the same person going on. So the way that I have experienced this, and if you are a child of somebody who could classically be diagnosed as narcissistic personality disorder, I'd be curious to know your answer, but I'm sure that it's already apparent, which is that you can see, if you're attracted to my work, that this person is definitely narcissistic in the way that they approach the world, but that they're actually codependent with somebody. Narcissists tend to be, narcissistic toward one person and, different with other people. It's like, to me, the way that I see it, it's the same blueprint, but filled in opposites. So my one friend was saying, I used to think that this person was a narcissist, but now after watching that stuff online, I think he's actually a codependent. And yes, both are true. So in people like me, which I would identify as, just for the sense of even connecting to you right now, a codependent empath, that frequency is a frequency in which if we had a healthy ego, the way that I teach this is, on the one side would be the devil, on the other side would be a chorus of angels, okay? In psychological terms, we would call this the id, which would be the animal, the inner thing that just wants to take or feels like, there's no bounds to the animal. And the moral collective chorus that says, if you are going to be perfect, you have to abide by this order. And you have to love everybody, even if they're living totally in the inner animal. You have to be the blessing that was not placed upon the world. You have to do all of these things in order to be good and to be perfect. And if you're not perfect, you're not worthy and lovable. So we hang out in the superego, or that chorus of angels. A balanced person would have a healthy ego, which would be the middle ground between that little devil, or the id, and the chorus of angels, or the superego. But we go, the ego is scary and dangerous, and it's really bad to be the animal, so I have to be perfect. So what we do, some personalities who've experienced this kind of shame would externalize that shame. So let's call them narcissistic personality disorder. And it's funny because codependents, we externalize our shame way more than we think we do, in projection alone, which is so impactful because, of course, what we're projecting onto the people that we love is going to be created because we are the creators. So we're going to get how we externally, even if it's passively aggressive externally, shaming, just by projecting alone that is what somebody means or whatever. That is how we covertly do that. But somebody might narcissistically externalize shame and have a target and, be constantly pushing at that envelope. But what we do is we have the outlet almost of the id, or the devil. We don't want it to go out because we're afraid of it. So we feel like it's bad, it's dangerous, because we've seen other people operate on this thing is bad, this thing is dangerous. We don't want to unleash this. So what we do is we actually turn it on ourselves. And anytime that the self comes close to like out of the super ego, back into a healthy ego, this thing is like, ah. So we hang out over here again and go, unless I'm perfect, I can't exist. And every time I try to exist and meet myself in the middle, I meet that thing that's shaming me and telling me I'm a piece of shit and telling me I'm toxic and blah, 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 blah. And this thing is just the same thing that somebody else would internalize on myself. So the pattern's there, right? The frequency is there. So our attempt to get away, if we've been raised in situations where that pattern is even in ourselves, we have to get in both sides of the pattern to become whole. To see the pattern for what it is and then be able to like step away from it and see it as just like, yeah, that's there, but I own the pattern now. It doesn't own me. So that's what I mean about when we claim our inner narcissist. One, we're doing that through shadow work, but we have to be aware that it's in there. And if you're somebody who's here who goes, I keep attracting narcissistic people in my life, well, if you claim the inner narcissist, it's going to collapse that, almost that void in the other side of the pattern, because it's the same pattern, just flip-flopped. So I was talking to somebody about, co-parenting with a narcissist the other day, and we have to be so careful because it can easily just throw us off center when we see somebody else doing the polar opposite of what we would do, and that we know they're doing it just to get at us. It's because we're trained to that frequency. It does not matter if it's their stuff. When we go, but it's their stuff, and like it's their stuff. The second we engage in it, it's our stuff. And that is a paradigm, and it is a train track, and it is a collective, contract that's going on, and you can unhook from it. But a lot of times people will polarize, and then their kids are trying to we're the kids that had to be stuck in the middle of that polarization, right? Like that's what we are. So the lifestyles will polarize. And all of a sudden, the kids are like, the bridge, the healthy people between, who end up being the scapegoats and end up being the people who are like in need of therapy, because this polarization is happening when if, my dad is really harsh on me, then all of a sudden my mom is really kind. But if my dad's really kind, my mom is really harsh. Like that's very confusing. And if you lived in a system that polarization was constantly happening, you understand that if you are co-parenting with somebody on this frequency, you have to own that you're in the frequency. You have to own it, because it's gonna own you if you don't own it. I'm speaking from experience. So we have to own that, like, yes, I might be void of the external part of like somebody who is like actively shameful and narcissistic, but I'm doing that to myself, and that's a part of my frequency. And it's the codependent part of me that wants to go, oh no, like I'm going to save you from being that thing, right? So I don't even look at the thing, because I want to save myself from having to look at myself in that light. We have to let that just stop for a second and realize that some people, if they had a healthy ego, this is what's funny, so many people can be narcissistic, and there is a balance, but if they had a healthy ego, if we had a healthy ego, we would sometimes be able to externalize this. We would go, actually, you're just a dick. And that would be okay. We wouldn't go home and feel shame for having an opinion. We would sometimes be able to release that and say, that doesn't work for me. And that would be okay. That would be healthy, right? So there is a fine line. If somebody's always here, just like unleashing whatever this is, that's obviously bad. But we have to understand that if we are a whole being, and we're operating in the codependent, and we all are. I mean, as a human body, that's what we are doing. But if you're operating on this frequency of codependency and narcissism, because you're an empath, we have to choose position in center. So that has to look like, okay, sometimes, like there's no way of me coming back to center when every time I try to get close to this thing, which is like my shame, or which is closer to like my ego, when I get into my ego and that's my centered place, every time we get there, we're afraid that this part of us is going to take over. And it's either going to attack ourselves or attack the world. And we have to get that this charge, like, it literally needs a say. It literally needs to come out. And we're not always bad. We're not always terrible if we're not perfect. And that charge has to be able to say, actually, there are other people in the world, and I'm not the asshole for asking this guy to, please move over when he's been standing in my way, knowing I'm waiting here for 5 minutes. Like, that doesn't make me the asshole. It actually makes that person the asshole, right? So a healthy person would be able to say that. We're not healthy when we go, oh, well, I don't want to make them move because my superego is telling me that I should be patient and kind. And it's exhausting. And we need to ground. And we kind of need to ground by owning this part, that it exists and that we're using it against ourselves. And that sometimes, and we're using it against ourselves constantly, which is exhausting. But in order for us to let it out, or to be healthy, we have to actually let it out. Like, it's normal to externalize a little bit. It's normal to externalize that. Okay? So we get so afraid because we don't want to be like narcissists, right? But it's going on just toward the center of us instead of like out there. We don't have to be afraid of that. We need that. That's like literally our medicine. Only us. I'm not like trying to turn other personality types into, whatever. But, and then the normal people will say that this is crazy, but that's cool. So I hope this was helpful for you, because I'm not saying go out and be an externalized narcissist by claiming your inner narcissist. I'm saying do the shadow work to establish what your healthy ego, what your ego is actually doing, your ego instead of everybody else's. And when you do that, you have the opportunity to actually like expand into this space which you can claim everything that you are. And that can be okay. It can all just be okay. And when you can do that, you're like bigger than the thing that you're currently, if you're watching this, probably in, which is like the grip of the frequency and the paradigm of that codependent or the codependent narcissistic thing. You can unhook from that. You can literally just envision yourself unhooking, becoming larger than it, seeing it from above it, and unhooking from it, because it's that easy. But we do have to kind of get into it first to integrate both sides of the pattern so that it can be whole when we step outside of it and go, oh, now I have something to stand on instead of like uneven ground under me. So I hope this was helpful. Bye.